thank you everyone for spending your evening with me. Thank you. Oregon is about to lose its sunshine, and we're going to be in the rainy season in 2 days. So anyway, thank you. I'm a geologist. I work for the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, and I worked there 20 years or so. And I was responsible for the minerals on the west side of the Cascades. And the Riddle Nickel Mine, which I call it, but actually it's probably better termed as the Hanna Mine. I never got to visit, but I know people who did some of the inspection work, particularly at the end of its life there in 1998. I'm going to show you pictures of both during the Hanna period of mining and smelting, and also during Glenbrook's nickel tenure there as well. So let me start by saying this is the opening slide. Here is the last day of smelting at the Glenbrook Nickel Company's smelter. It was taken by the folks at Tagami, which is where I worked, at the other part of our program, which is the mine land reclamation and regulation folks. And we'll share pictures with back and forth with them. So you can see the whole facility here, from the stockpiles all the way through over here to the smelters. And back here, we'll talk a little bit about the waste piles out here, and I will end my presentation with a little bit about that. I understand we have Art here who is going to help correct me if I overstep or misrepresent something. So please, Art, chime in and let me know. So let me start by saying that Riddle is in Southwest Oregon. It's about 150 miles from Portland. It's on a Highway 5. In fact, you can see the Nickel Mountain, the actual mine site from the interstate. As you take a quick look off to the west. Here's a topographic or an overlay of an orthophotograph on top of LiDAR. You can see that this is the top of Nickel Mountain. You can see even in recent photographs, you can still see there's quite a bit of evidence of mining up here. It was all, if you want to call it, surface mining. And down here, about 2 miles down the way, as the crow flies, and is the smelting area. I want to say Riddle is off to the east here, just off this map. As far as the geology goes, I've got two parts of this slide. To the left is the Oregon's physiographic regions, and we're in the Klamath Mountain terrain, and it's off in the southwest. This is a late Jurassic to Jurassic ophiolitic complex. It's if you want to go and see some fantastic geology, that's the place to go. It's a mess, is what I used to call it when I'd get field questions about it. The other side is a kind of a generalized geologic map showing the terrains. I've got 3 of them circled here up on the legend, and we can see that Nickel Mountain sort of covers both of this, all 2 terrains and the Myrtle group, and I'll explain a little bit about what the stratigraphy is in another slide. But Nickel Mountain, the nickel at Nickel Mountain is a siliceous nickel laterite. The laterites that you see down here to the south, Red Flats, $8 Mountain, Woodcock, and Josephine, are more ferruginous nickel laterites. And I will add that these have all been looked at as far as commercial. Red Flats has been kind of in the news off and on lately. There is a environmental storm whenever somebody mentions going back in there and looking at that nickel as a resource. So here's what the kind of a close-up of the top of the hill or the mine looks like. And I've got labeled areas where there was mining that took place. There's about 7 areas that mining occurred. You know, what stands out here is the tailings from the belt, from the loading area, the loading station. Also note here that there's a 220-foot deep pit. That's actually a fault, and weathering was able to penetrate into the the saprolite here, and I'll tell you what the shiver here is in a minute. And they were able to get quite a bit of resource. In my opinion, this is probably where or what really Hanna looked at as far as a resource, and encouraged them to look at this a little more. Deposit size, 63.8 million tons, nothing that's pretty darn big. And there's two types of ores. There's an oxide that's kind of a cap, and then below this to the water table was this hydrous magnesium silicate, was about 80%, and this nickel grade about 1.8 to 1.5 was an average, and there was a great deal of effort to homogenize the ore so there was a consistent feed to the smelter. Garnerite was they call it a mineral, but it's not. It's a group of minerals. It's a hydrous nickel silicate. I can't pronounce most of the minerals that are part of it, but this is what they were looking for. The rock here, its host is a peridotite or Hartsbergite. And so getting a piece of this anymore nowadays is pretty darn hard to find. You can find them on eBay, but that's about it. You can't go to the site anymore and collect this stuff. This is what the geology kind of looks like, and I apologize because I cannot find a better geologic map than what Rowe and others produced in 1976. But it kind of gives you an idea of the geology, some of the ore bodies that were looked at. On the south side here, that there was a peridotite was underlain by sheared serpentinite in the Dothan Formation. The Dothan Formation is a sandstone siltstone with volcanics. You can see here where my cursor is. This map is not registered quite right, but there is the open pit, or this is a big shear zone that allowed for the deeper mining. Under Nickel Mountain in general, there's peridotite, dunite, what you'd expect for ultramafic rocks, and off to the northwest of and west is a peridotite underlain by the Dothan Formation. And what they map this is as a thrust sheet, remnants of a thrust sheet on top of here. If we look at the stratigraphy of the ore body, the ore body itself from the literature is anywhere from 5 to 20 feet thick. As I mentioned earlier, it was 220 feet deep, associated with the shear zone. But you can see that there's different types of ore here, from the red soil at the surface through the saprolite down to the boxwork type of mineralization, which you formed at the water table. And you can see the grades here. We won't read the grades here, but there was a concerted effort both at the top of the hill, at the loading stations, or where they stockpile the ores to keep the grade at a consistent level. And this is kind of a real simplified stratigraphic section that shows you from the top of the set, the red soil, which is typical in this part of associated with the ultramafics, through a yellow zone, an oxide zone, into the weathered peridotites, and down here at the water table you would get the boxwork type textures. The boxworks textures, getting a picture of that or finding a picture, and I could not find it in our Degami's archives or even on the internet. You can find some of that kind of texture that if you look at the Caledonia laterites, but not here. So let's give you a kind of a timeline who operated the mine. So let's start here. The nickel was actually discovered, I guess you would say, in 1886. They kind of poked a few holes and put a shaft here and there up into the 1900s. Even Thomas Edison had an interest in the deposit. It didn't go anywhere. Now, when World War II broke out, for strategic purposes, and the L208 effort, then the mountain was looked at. The USGS came in there. They evaluated. Free Sulfur Company was interested, came in there and looked at it, drilled about 40 to 50 holes, and that really didn't develop it to anything. Hanna, was aware of what was going on, and in the 50s in the late 1940s, 1949 on up, they were interested in it, and by 1953, Hanna, signed a couple of government contracts that allowed them to mine. In fact, the government said that they would build the smelter and help finance some of the capital expenditures. Now, Hanna had to sell to the government at a certain price, and that led to litigation, and we won't get into that. But Hanna produced two companies. The Hanna Mining Company mined the hill, mined the deposit, and then the Hanna Smelting Company took care of the smelting of the ore. Hanna went out to close the mine in 1987. And it stood idle for a little while. In fact, they even stripped a lot of their machinery out, particularly in the smelter. So Glenbrook came in, and they started in 1989, sorry. And they operated the mine, or worked the deposit all the way up to about 1996, and they closed the mine, and that's the last it operated. However, Glenbrook went into a 10-year contract, and with to get ore from New Caledonia from their laterite deposits, and they operated the smelter all the way up into 1998, and that's when it all ended. So this is a mine and smelter layout. It's from 1981. It's part of what Hanna produced, or I'm sorry, Hanna was the one who kind of drew this up. Up to the left corner is the mine, and we'll talk about the process in a couple flow diagrams as we proceed during this talk. But here's the mine up here up in the left corner. They had a tram that brought the ore down to the smelter, stockpiled it along the way up in here, the surge piles and all the other, and the crusher down to the ore stockpiles. They did grade controls, and grade control. The smelter had to have a constant feed at constant grade. It's also very important that this ore was dried, so they had dryers and kilns. They had a stockpile here, or they had dry ore stockpiles, and they're siloed because they couldn't get it with the rainy season down there. Wouldn't allow it to sit out in the yard. They also did quite a bit of grade control in the storage too. Went through calciners, roasters, and then finally into the furnace area, and we'll show pictures of that. What I do not have pictures of is the furnace and the and other photographs of how they made ferrosilicon, and we'll talk a little bit about that. They did get ferrosilicon at some time at about 35 miles to the west, or I'm sorry, to the east, at what they called Quartz Mountain. So what we're talking about here, the smelter covered about 40 acres. The overall acreage for this site was about 528. I'd say 600 probably is better to call it. And the mine and the smelter were 2 miles apart. So to the left, you've got a process diagram, a flow diagram. And to the right here, we're starting at the top at the mine. This is a Hanna picture. You can see these even on Flickr right now if you look at the address there. We're loading 35-ton trucks with 3 to 5 yard shovels. Again, these deposits were 25 to 20 feet thick, and they did quite a bit of selective digging here. You can see here that over here where my cursor is, you can see boulders. They threw this as waste over the side of the hill into the waste piles. Let's see, I said there were 35 or 40-ton trucks, and they even went up to larger trucks during the latter part of mining. Next, we'll go down here to the I call this the loading pocket. That's where my underground experience. But this is the screening and crushing area. Up here to the top of the figure is where they had the upper office, changing facilities, maintenance shop, and warehouse. what you expected at a mine. There's where they stack the ore, stockpile the ore, and then we'll talk a little bit about how they trammed it down here in the next slide or two. So they had a tram and stacking operation that was quite impressive. So it was 8,400 foot long. At that time, it was the largest in the United States, and it had a elevation drop of about 2,000 feet. That's pretty darn impressive. So this is the 1960s Hanna picture, and we can just about tell Hanna what's the difference between Glenbrook's era and Hanna's by the number of silos that they have down at the bottom. Here's the tramway and stacking operation. By the way, these are cars that went up and down, were self-propelled. They generated their own electricity as they went up and down. And that's pretty, there is some stories that say they sold it back to Bonneville Power. I haven't found anything that says that they actually used that as part of their electricity for the arc furnaces to when the final smelting of the nickel. They're 2-ton cars, and you can see that this is the stacker here, automatic stacker. Again, great control was done here to keep that mill or that furnace feed at a steady rate. So they made we're now down at Art's area, and he can correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. They made a 50% nickel ferronickel. They had to keep the stockpiling the ore had to be pretty darn dry, so to keep the moisture down to 3 to 5%. They did, like I said, everywhere I've looked, they were really active in trying to get rid of waste, keep the mill feed at a constant rate, and then they had calcining. The melting was about 29 to 3,000 degrees. They used a Pirin-Eugene process, and so they employed a 48% ferrosilicon silicon mixture to the ore. When they melted it, they shook it, they mixed it vigorously, and then they took it into a refining electric furnace. Out the end came a 28-pound pig, ferronickel pig, and they loaded on 4,000-pound pallets. So here's the dryers, a picture of the dryers. This is during the Hanna Nickel Smelting Company era. The kiln or the dryers and calciners are in through here. These are the belts that from the I believe it's from the silos, and you can see that then they took this and they went to the smelter. And this is the picture. I believe this is from the front looking into the furnace. The furnace is on the left, and these are bag houses off to the right. And you can see here that we had a ferrosilicon furnace, which is off the picture behind us. Then we had 4 melting furnaces where the ore went in. We had we'll go into the inside of the smelter here in a minute, and we'll look. We also had 2 furnaces. Those are refining furnaces with the electric furnaces, and we'll take a look at those. So these are the 2 side-by-side pictures, and these were taken during Glenbrook's era. So these are mixing ladles that you see off to the left. So you can see where here we have a pour that was going into one of the mixing ladles from the melting furnace, or this is where the ore was coming in, where they melted the ore. They would come over here and they would pour the molten ore, or the ore that they had melted, and they would pour it back and forth into these thieving ladles, or they would mix them in the mixing ladles. They'd add ferrosilicon into this one too, and they would then pour off the metal into these thieving ladles. The rest of what was left would go out to the slag piles, And they did this because the ferronickel was heavier, and the slag would obviously float to the top. So that was the way they did it. Kind of very complicated, and somebody had to know what they were doing. So the gentleman right here had to be pretty aware of the properties of all that was going on and how they did it. And Art might chime in there a little later on and give us a little more detail on how difficult this was and the skill it took to carry this out. Here's a view of the high voltage electric furnaces. You can see the electrodes here. This is the pot here. This is the top view. You can see the electrodes here, and then they're pouring out the metals through the out into the pigs, into the casting pigs. And like I said, they were 28 pounds each. And boy, they had a lot of this stuff, didn't they, Art? Slag was a storage issue, but in 1999, they found a way, or found a market for this stuff, and they started to sell it. It is a greenish sand, coarse silica. There isn't any kind of metals, or not high metals in it. They've gotten over that hurdle now as far as marketing this product out there. Green Diamond Performance Materials is still operating, and they are expanding their markets out into other areas other than just aggregate. Their roofing shingles and other markets out there. So they're putting about 15 million tons out there from the slag, from the byproduct slag. They're also, and I understand this, and I can't really verify or certain picture, but they also would recover chromium or chromite out from this, and they would sell that off too as a kind of a byproduct of kind of classifying and sorting this material out. So kind of as a summary of what went on here. So Hanna Mining Company and Smelting Company operated the mine and smelter first. This was followed by Glenbrook Nickel Company. Then, as we have today, we have Green Diamond Performance Materials. Came out of all this and is still going. The mine and smelting was started in 1954, and the smelter closed in 1998. They had 600 employees, and for Riddle and for that area, you have to understand that was huge. And decent wage paying jobs. I mean, what an economic boom this was. And of course now there's quite a bit of it's never recovered, in my opinion. Like I said, it had 600 acres, 6 to 7 major areas were mined. Open cut method, or strip mining, is what some others call it. 20 foot high benches, maybe up to 50 sometimes. Again, we had this deep area, this pit area that was 220 feet deep because of the structures that went through there that allowed the infiltration and formation of this nickel-bearing ore, the garnerite. Again, you see the averages there and we had oxides as well as a unoxidized ore, or magnesium silicate. 50% ferrosilicon was the final product, and it came out of the process that, by the way, that Hanna developed, and it was kind of the precursor for them to decide to go into the early mining in the 1950s. And they produced about close to 27 million tons of nickel over 44 years of operation. 44 years of operation in Oregon is huge. I want to back up, kind of go back in the 1800s. An average gold mine in Oregon only lasted 3 years. The exception was 5, and there's a few that were even lasted a bit longer, but that's huge, just to give you kind of a way to compare that. And Green Diamond's performance materials, started as a way to try to see if they could make some money off the slag or the waste product coming out, and it's still going well today to the present. I understand there's about 60 employees now, and it's based all still there in Riddle. So thank you. If you got any questions, let me know and I'll stop sharing.
Since Art is here and he's a veteran of this, I thought maybe we'd give him the first chance of a comment or questions.
Be gentle on me, Art. You're muted, Art. You're muted.
There, is it clear now?
Yes,
You're
sir.
good.
All right, now I got you. All right. I was just going to say, I can add a few things to that.
Good.
When Cominco took it over and became Glenbrook Nickel,
Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah.
the idea was not to so much go back to the mine. We opened up the lower ore body at the
Right.
mine. We operated off of the stockpiles that were down there that were left over from Hanna. But the main object was to go to New Caledonia and start importing ore. We put
Right.
in a importation facility over in Coos Bay, and we were bringing over about 1 million tons a year at the height. So
Right.
that's where we were getting our ore from. We would actually dry it over in or dry it over in Coos Bay, and then bring it over by trucks and put it right into the operation.
I can show you pictures of that if we want to go back and share a screen, because Barb told me I had a time limit and I couldn't go over it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just filling in a couple of things. Then the other thing was as far as the byproduct was concerned, as far as the slag, the majority of the slag was actually sold over a period of time. It started back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, but they were only selling it for sandblasting material to the Navy shipyards.
Oh, okay.
And then later on in the 90s, we started to develop more uses for the slag. So now, if I'm not mistaken, they do not only sandblasting, they do foundry sands, which we found out it was just a phenomenal use for foundry sands. It cut the cleaning time in the foundries, and it really impressed all them foundries. Almost all the aluminum foundries nowadays kind of hold Glenbrook nickel as their standard for sand. And then we used to find other uses for it. Roofing, of course, was another big one, but it wasn't necessarily for the colored granule. It was for the backing, the bottom, and what they called the headlap part of the shingle. So it wasn't the colored portion of the shingle.
Yeah.
And then we also explored water jet cutting, a number of things. In the end, I think we were producing about 40 different products, not some of them in the same industry. A lot of it goes for agriculture now. A lot of it uses on golf courses, and not so much for the chemical, but for the granulated sand acts as a filtration system for the water. So they don't have a lot of standing water on the fairways and the greens. And that was very impressive for them. So like I said, all in all, they're making about 40 different products. They're selling about 15,000 tons of product a month off of the slag. And they are also recovering nickel. And the nickel that's being recovered is actually sent back into the steel mills in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So that's kind of an update on what they've been doing with it. I guess one thing that would be interesting is to note why it was shut down in '98. And that was kind of a blow, because everybody thought nickel was going to be in the $5-6 range through the 90s. But because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, nickel prices went down to about $1 a pound.
Yeah.
And Glenbrook just decided that we were not going to fight that, because nobody knew how long that was going to last. So that was the real demise of the nickel smelter. If it had stayed around $5-6 a pound, it probably would have stayed open a lot longer.
Sure.
That's just kind of a quick rundown on kind of after what happened after Hanna.
So Coos Bay, the loading facility, the docks that you had there were reused later on by the folks there at American Industrial. For chromite, for foundry sands, they were mining the dunes, and they used that facility there and used the silo, the holding silo that you guys built there. They actually used that for stockpile. So that site has been used again for mining it, but that's been closed now for quite a little while.
All right. So it looks like Ed, you had your hand up with either a comment.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. How much did they pay for electric power, and how much was the government paying them for the nickel?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know that. Clark, maybe you do. I can tell you how much we paid for the power during my term. We were paying about 15 to 20 cents a kilowatt. But that was a sweetheart deal. That was a sweetheart deal because Cominco actually had several hydro plants up in Canada that we were kind of trading power into the Northwest grid. And we were getting from Bonneville, we were getting a kind of, if you want to call it, a subsidized rate. So it was actually beneficial for both.
Yeah, Art, is that 1.5 to 2 cents per kilowatt or 15?
Yeah, that would be about right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said 15
Oh,
to
no,
20.
did I say that? I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's very high.
Okay.
So we're paying about $6 a kilowatt hour now so that's why natural gas is still going strong here, and anything else that's renewable like geothermal cannot make it in Oregon at that price. So until the kilowatt hour goes, or the price of the kilowatt hour goes up, Oregon is just, talking about it, but they can't do much to get it going. So the government agreed to buy 125 million pounds of nickel from Hanna at a set price. Hanna could not make a profit on this or something like that, sell it at a higher price or a profit on it. I did read some litigation that the government sued Hanna, and I don't know how it ended, but as nickel prices fluctuated. Do you know anything more about that, Art?
The only thing I can tell you on that is the government actually paid for the smelter and built the smelter.
That's right.
The government built the smelter, and it was later turned over to Hanna as kind of a reward to help out for the war effort, and they were given a very reduced price. And without that capital investment, I know that Hanna was making money off the operation. How much, I don't know. I think part of the litigation that you're referring to is the price that that paid for the smelter. How much Hanna paid for the smelter. There was a bit of a turmoil in Congress about giving such a prize or an award for the war effort.
Right.
So that's all I know about those.
And remember, at that time in the 50s, Oregon actually was mining chromite at the time and stockpiling it at the government stockpile there at Grants Pass, which is farther south, just a little farther south than from Riddle. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure we monitor the chat. Tom puts in excellent presentation, Clark, and it truly was a great presentation.
Okay.
We're getting close to 8 o'clock, so I wanted to get that acknowledgement out there in case people are wanting to log out. I can stay on for a little bit longer. I do see that Jack has his hand up for a question. If you want to give us your comment or question.
I was wondering what the total amount of ore that was produced in the mine over its life, and what was the stripping situation?
The what situation?
The waste stripping in the mine.
Oh, the waste stripping. Oh, that the mine was not really operating when I was there. I don't know. Maybe Clark might know that.
So they did. And I gave you a figure at the end that they produced, close to 27 or 20, close to 27 million tons of nickel over its lifetime. Now that includes Glenbrook, of course. But as far as stripping and reclamation, I didn't put any slides in there. As Art said, they were doing the lower ore body, which was to the southeast, and it was actually was a landslide if the maps are correct or anywhere close. But they mined everything from the topsoil down to the surface of the fresh peridotite.
Oh,
And,
okay.
they blended all that, and then they did their ore control at the top while they were mining, and all the way through the process, all the way up to when they put it in the dry silos. Did that answer your question?
Yes, well, what I take it from that is essentially everything they mined, they processed.
They process, that's right. And so when you see it out there right now and people go by and say, has it been reclaimed? Yes, part of it, or most of it has been reclaimed. Certainly Glenbrook's has been reclaimed. The reclamation started in 1972, and I'm sure Hanna had to do, they did their share of what they were doing at the, certainly what they were working on at the time. But restoration has only been the lakes or some of the holding ponds that they've used and some of the pads that were erected. That's about all I've ever seen and read about. I did get the files from MLRR, or Mine Land Reclamation folks, all of their files, and I looked through them. And
well, I can add a quick thing about reclamation.
okay.
In the lower ore body, we work with Dogami quite a bit.
Yeah.
Alan Throop on the lower ore body restoration project. Then we did some voluntary reclamation on the north slope on BLM land.
Right.
And that was in 98 into 99, maybe into 2000 when we worked on that. But
yeah.
Again, kudos out to Dogami at the time. Alan Throop and those guys were really great to work with. And
Alan, I've always heard good things about Alan. He died from multiple brain dead, but he has passed.
Yeah.
Nancy, I've still talked to her a little bit. You probably remember Nancy Collins.
Yes.
Yes, I still talk to her a little bit. So, well, thank you, Greg. Yeah.
All right, did we have other questions for Clark?
We'll come to Oregon. We've got a lot to see, and there's an awful lot of mining history too. We don't have any great places to go that are big, but if you want to go underground, I've got a few places we can go. So,
My wife is from Grants Pass.
okay. And
So we spent a lot of time there,
all right.
particularly the Columbia River Gorge.
Yes, and so.
Great. It's a great presentation, Clark. Great
Well,
presentation.
thank you, Mike.
Great.
Yes,
job.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Clark.
All right,
Interesting.
any other questions for Clark? As we get to the end, again, it was a truly great presentation. We certainly wish Barbara well. I'm sure she'll be back leading the next nugget for us, but if not, I'll be happy to fill in again if we need to. Any last questions for Clark? All right. Well, I thank you all for attending. And again, thank you to Clark for teaching us about nickel mining in Oregon. I think it was truly a great presentation and eye-opening when we started thinking about a rainy season and how long that would last in Oregon. So.
And Art, what a fantastic place to live and work out there too. I hope, yeah.
I was out there for 20 years, but anyway,
Yes.
it was a very nice presentation, and thank you very
Okay.
much for inviting me to your meeting today.
Well, thanks for your help and input on this, Art. Thank you.
All right, Art, we hope to see you in the future.
Art, it was good to see you again, Art. Take care.
Yeah, okay, take care, Shane.